mean, basically, UConn went unchallenged the entire tournament.
Well, it got touch and go there for a minute. I mean, you're talking about San Diego State going on a 14-4 run starting at the 9-minute mark in the second half. Like, they made it interesting.
5?
They cut it to 5, and UConn on the season is 0 for 4 when games are decided by 5 points or less. So it got interesting.
Think of the reach there. At one point in the game in the first half, it got to a score.
It got interesting, Max. It got interesting.
In the second half, Max, in the second half.
Second half.
Oh, yeah.
Second half.
Right,
second half.
Right,
it got interesting. I'll put it to you that way. But, I mean, UConn has been dominant all tournament wrong. They have a plus 120-point differential throughout the tournament in 6 games. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Chris, did you just say all tournament wrong? Or
I said all tournament long.
Oh, I thought you said all tournament wrong.
I mean, Jay, I know it was a late night for you. It's an early morning for you.
Hey,
I get all of that thing. You're hearing things that you want to hear.
I'm asking for clarity.
I'm trying to clarify for you. I'm trying to clarify for you.
They covered every spread.
UConn's just a dominant team, man. And Chris, we were on the show yesterday talking about how we were both taking the cover the spread at 7, just because I thought they had way too much size. I mean, look, when San Diego State, the question was always, can they score enough in the first half? And when you miss 14 consecutive shots, you're getting shots beat at the rim by Sonogo and Klingon and those boys. You know, being there, the size that those guys have, that's an NBA front line. And not a lot of college teams play 2 bigs the way Dan Hurley plays. And for me last night, just watching them win it, watching Bob Hurley Sr. in the stands.
In the end, UConn beats San Diego State 76-59. That's the school's 5th national title. They're the 5th team, the Huskies are, since the bracket expanded in 1985 to win all 6 NCAA tournament games by double digits. They covered every spread, as I mentioned. What is it, Chris?
Good teams win, great teams cover.
Great teams cover on the way to the championship. And I get that the competition's not the same at the college level because it's getting, siphoned off by, obviously, the pros at an earlier age. And if it's not the NBA, it's overseas. But this has got to be, when you think about the all-time dominant teams, you can only play who's there. It's hard to do more than they did.
I'm not calling them all-time dominant.
Okay, but in their era, they did in their era what the best teams throughout history have done in their era.
Yeah, well, define era. Like, are you talking about last year? Like, is last year's Final Four in this era? Because I'm not sure they would have won last year.
No. I'm saying that in this era of, even if you want to argue, well, it's not the same, right? But still, you can only play who's there. And if you're beating every team by double digits, if you're covering every spread, and you go on to win the chip, how many teams have done it? Well, there are 5 to win by double digits in every game since '85, since it expanded.
I think I was one of those teams, Max.
Yeah, right.
This is a humble brag there on the back. Like, and it's not that. Look, I think UConn is an incredible team. They hit their stride, but I'm not going to sit up here today from understanding college basketball and being in it for as long as I did to call them one of the most dominant teams. Like, this is a team that had a tough stretch. I think defensively they are a great team. And they won a championship. It takes nothing away from them. I'm just not putting them as one of the all-time greats team.
That's right. That's right. But
that's okay. It's not a knock on them.
No, I agree with that. But in the day, they had one of the great dominant tournaments.
Yeah, I will say this. I am, as a kid from the Northeast New Jersey, to me, like, I had a nostalgic moment last night because, like, look, I had a weird feeling, just to be frank, about UConn. Kevin Ollie is a really good friend of mine. He was a mentor of mine when he played in Milwaukee, when I played in Chicago. I used to go to chapel with him, Chris Canty. We would talk all the time. So, and he's one of only 3 black head coaches to ever win a national championship in college basketball, right? You got him, you got Nolan Richardson at Arkansas, you got John Thompson at Georgetown. And the way things went down with him at UConn left a weird taste in my mouth. He actually completed a lawsuit 9 years ago. He won a championship. He got his salary for $14 million. There's a lot of changes with the school going into the AAC, which I didn't really agree about. It was more about them chasing the football money. But them coming back to the Big East now and representing, and think about the dominance that the Big East has had. You have Villanova winning it with Jay Wright. Now the move that they made with Jim Calhoun, bringing in Dan Hurley, which I love Dan. I thought he was the right move. Think about what's happening with Georgetown. You have Ed Cooley coming back to Georgetown to revive Georgetown. Think about what's happening with St. John's. Rick Pitino coming back to the city. He was already here with Iona, but to come back and now represent the Big East with their TV contract coming up in a year, guys.
Ooh.
You talk about timing now.
Yes, sir.
This is a big move for a power conference. Big move. His style is not going to be for everybody. In an age in which kids don't like to be told no, with the rate that's happening with the transfer portal, with the way coaches are recruiting kids off other people's rosters while they're playing, it is the wild, wild west society that we live in right now with college basketball. And Dan Hurley is direct. He's in your face. You saw it last night with 3 minutes left to go in the game. They were up double digits, and he still had this scowl on his face. You're like, damn, man, you guys are up double digits. You're going to win it. But he doesn't turn that spigot off, Chris. It stays on all the time. And that's not for everybody. But it would be for my son, Zane, if he makes it to that level, because I want somebody to hold my son accountable day to day. And that's what he does with these young men day to day for UConn.
Yeah, Jay, when you talk about college basketball, that's one of the things that you harp on is just accountability with these players and the lack thereof based on the transfer portal and the influence of NIL money. Guys are jumping to different schools in order to find the best situation that they perceive for them. But I guess I look at what Dan Hurley is trying to put together from a culture standpoint and say it lends itself to being able to have a certain degree of continuity because you're only going after a certain kid. And Seth Greenberg made the point last night after the game, and he said very few programs have the success in recruiting the geographical footprint like UConn. Look at all of the guys that play integral roles on that team last night. They're all from the New England area. I mean, and I guess you go as far down as D.C., but, I mean, it's impressive to see how they're able to find guys within their area that fit what Dan Hurley wants to do, and they're able to keep those guys in school. And, sure, you go in the transfer portal and you pluck a guy here and there like they did with Tristan, and you roll with that. But I think it's a situation where you have the continuity that continues to perpetuate the culture that leads itself to success. And that's exactly what Dan Hurley is building at UConn. This ain't the last time we're seeing them in the Final Four stage. I can promise you that.
Oh, no. And Max, I will say this. As much as I enjoy watching the game last night because I'm a basketball purist, man, it was a hard watch. It was a really hard watch to be. I always keep it a buck with everybody in the show. And I found myself multiple times watching the men's game being like, I wish I was seeing round 2 of Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark.
Yeah,
right,
man.
I really do. Like, I don't know what to say. Sorry. Just is what it is.
Apparently, Jill Biden does, too. We're going to get to that later.
Everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah, right. Now, everybody. First time ever, everyone gets a trophy. But hold on a second. If UConn is here to stay, you think this is not the last time we see them maybe chip up in the Dan Hurley era, right?
Yeah.
Does this national championship now cement UConn as a blue blood where it was UConn already a blue blood? What do you think about that, Jay?
Yeah, man. I mean, they've won 5 chips since the year 1999. So, I mean, blue bloods to me mean there's a sustainability of success. There's a relevancy factor. And I think UConn for the last couple of years has been relevant since Dan Hurley has rejuvenated this team. So when I look at their teams with Khalid Al-Amin back in the day in 99, they beat that powerhouse Duke team. I look at that team with Kemba Walker where he went on that incredible run during the Big East tournament. I forget the kid from Pitt. He just made fall down the ground. He hit that buzzer beater during the run, and it kind of set up their run during the tournament. I look at the success that they've had over the years. There's no question they're a blue blood. They're one of the most relevant teams in the Big East.
By the way, earlier I said 27 years. I got my wires. It's 99. So I went to UCLA.
Yeah. They just won it with Kevin Ollie, 9 years.
Right. I went to UCLA, which was 95. So it's 24 years.
Yeah, players mess up, Max. It's okay.
Not me. It's the first mistake I've ever made in my life.
Players
Chris.
mess
It's weird. I don't know what to do. So, all right. So here's the question now, Jay. Do you agree with that, by the way? Connecticut
Max,
already a blue blood?
They've won 3 national titles since 2011, and it's been 3 different head coaches. They're a blue blood program.
Something about
no matter
blue
who's
blood,
at the helm.
Something about blue blood, you have to have some history doing it, too. You know what I mean? Like, is that enough? I
The
get that they've done it
30 years,
recently.
they got
The
pretty
last
damn
30
good
years.
history.
But do you understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying?
100 years?
In my mind, you need history, but you don't want it to be too long ago and nothing recent.
Yeah.
You also need recent success, but you don't want all the success to be recent to be a blue blood. You kind of need a little bit of. In my mind, I think you need a little bit of both. Jim Calhoun, by the way, 3-time national champion head coach, is going to join us at 9:05 Eastern this morning.
It's interesting that you bring up that point, though, Max. You're talking about not all of your success being recent and wanting to have a storied past. And I hate to do this, but just drawing a parallel to the NFL, the New England Patriots, all of their success from a franchise standpoint happened from the early 2000s when Belichick was there till now. I mean, they're still considered one of the flagship franchises of the National Football League. If you look at their history before the 2000s, it's ugly.
They were on the wrong side of a whooping in the Super Bowl against the greatest team ever.
They would be the equivalent of a blue blood NFL franchise. So, I mean, I don't know how far back you actually have to go. I think when
I think you're starting to pin it down, right?
I think when you come to college basketball, 20, 30 years is about the time frame that you can use to judge whether or not a program is upper echelon in comparison to the rest of the college basketball landscape. And there's no doubt that UConn fits that bill.
And then you got to factor in the women, too. Like, what they did just elevates the whole thing in your mind. The institution itself is college. Okay. So, Jay, Mount Rushmore, what I loved about the Mount Rushmore craze, which kind of faded, but we're going to bring it back a little bit, is it's really an exercise in exclusion, right? In editing. You have to exclude some names here. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of college basketball blue bloods? Jay, you got to pick 4. Who's on?
All right, Shannon, bear with me because I know I gave you 4, but I'm changing it up because I had to. So
remix.
Here we go.
Wait, how? What? Hold on.
My basketball blue bloods. Yeah, I can change things up.
Flag on the play. Hold on here.
Welcome to life, Pat.
Mount Rushmore's
when
only
you
4.
think you have it one way, and then you know what? You decide to turn right and go a different way in life.
How many presidents are on Mount Rushmore?
What? 4.
Okay. But he just keeps changing the face.
What are you talking about? I still have 4. I'm just changing who the face is. It's okay. Everybody take a chill pill. Here we go. We got North Carolina. We have Kansas. We have UConn. And we have Duke.
There you go.
On my blue blood list.
There you go.
The Mount Rushmore blue bloods. Now, look, I have, very similar to Elon Musk, UCLA has not paid their $8 for their blue check. So I am removing them because, look, with the exception of 1995, which was 20 plus years ago, Max, like we said, like right around that cutoff date. Before that, I mean, their last one was close to 50 years ago, 45 years, 1975. So, I mean, they had this incredible run, 64, 65, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 75. And then one in 95. They haven't won one in the 2000s. And that program, I just feel like, has been lost for a while. Now, Mick Cronin's doing a really good job. Steve Lavin, some guys have done good jobs. Ben Howland's done a good job getting them there. But they haven't won one in a very long time. So, sorry, I'm kind of taking you off the list. I mean, even Kentucky, they got one. I'm like, okay, but it feels like they struggle. Where I look at Duke, Duke has had 5. I mean, they've had 2000. I mean, we have 3 in the year 2000, 2001. We got one 2015, 2010, 92, 93.
Yeah, you can't argue against Duke. Duke's on.
Yeah, I mean, and Coach K, greatest coach of all time, him right there alongside with UCLA. I get that. You have UConn, 99, 2004, 2011, 2014, 2023. You have North Carolina, 2005, 2009, 2017. And then you have Kansas, 2008, 2022.
Yeah.
You tell me.
No, you're right, Jay. I think the criteria is multiple championships in the 2000s. If you got that, you're probably a blue blood program. And then you look at Kansas's case, even though they don't have as many as Duke, UNC, and UConn in the 2000s, look at the conference titles that they've won. I mean, what is it, 18 straight years?
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Where you're talking about them having a share of the Big 12 title? I mean, it's ridiculous the level of consistency that Bill Self has been able to have out there. So, yeah, Jay, I think you nailed it on the head with this one. I think this is the Mount Rushmore of college basketball blue blood programs. We got to confine this to the last 2 or 3 decades, right? Because if you're going back any further than that, then you're losing the conversation a little bit because of the relevance of the program, right? Yeah. That matters when it comes to recruiting and being able to have sustained success, especially in this era of college basketball. So with all respect to what John Wooden did, I think the greatest coach of all time, regardless of sport, you can't live off of, you can't win championships off of yesteryear's wins. And so I think that's the thing that UCLA has kind of fallen into, and that's why it's hard to consider them for that conversation with the list.
It's tough to argue against John Wooden. You look at the record. But it is fair to say, just like when you look at Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain, the league, you don't discount it to nothing. They're among the greatest players ever.
Yes.
But you do take a little discount compared to players who played in the modern era because, simply put, the competition was not the same back then, right? So Wooden it was easier to win in Wooden's era than in Coach K's era.
He had some dudes, Max. He had Bill. I mean, look, the dominance that he had.
That's what I'm saying, though, Jay.
64 to 75.
It's ridiculous.
Bill
but I
Walton
think
and company. I mean, I've heard people call Bill Walton the greatest basketball player to ever play basketball.
Yeah. No, but I 100%. But I'm saying you have someone like that back then. There wasn't a lot to go against it compared to, look, Jay, what Coach K did, and you were a part of that. In that era, if you get 5, that's much harder than getting 5, let's say. And I know Wooden got more than 5 when Wooden did it. That's what I'm saying.
Are you sure, though? I mean, context matters. Think about the history in the era that John Wooden was winning championships in. It had its own unique challenges. It wasn't easy. I mean, the 60s and the 70s, come on now.
CC.
Think about what was going on in the world back then. It's not easy to keep. I'm just saying, but it's not easy to keep the focus on the team in the business of trying to compete at the highest level because players are being pulled in all kinds of directions when you think about what was going on back then.
That's why.
So I'm just saying, let's not discount that part of it.
CC. John Wooden had NIL before NIL, baby.
I ain't gonna argue that now. I ain't gonna argue that.
All-time most legendary stories you will ever hear. This has always been the way it is. But I give this takes nothing away from John Wooden being the greatest coach to ever coach college basketball. If you want to put Coach K in that category, fine. I would because I coached by him. But what he's been able to accomplish has been unprecedented. I'm just looking at the last 40 years, and I'm saying, okay, if we're updating this, if there was a list 45 years ago, no problem. But if we're updating this list, what does the 2023 version of this list and relevancy have to do with what happened 45, 50 years ago?
How much do iconic moments in the conference tournaments, NCAA tournament, and iconic players factor into the math? Like guys that have come through your program but that have gone on to have success in the NBA at the highest level, how much of that is a part of program success and equating them to being blue blood status?
Especially when that iconic player had an iconic moment in the tournament.
So you mean Michael Jordan?
When MJ hits that shot, and it turns out that's Michael Jordan, not Mike Jordan, but Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan.
You know, I think that's a really good point, Jay. I think that absolutely those indelible those moments in your mind that are seared into your mind, particularly when, look, say whatever you want about Christian Laettner. He went on he was on the Dream Team before he was even a pro and had a nice little career, but also had an incredible tournament, right?
He had an incredible moment in the tournament.
In the tournament.
Yeah, I even, the thing that makes this interesting is the school that by far has the most pros is Kentucky. Right? I mean, by far. I mean, with A.D., Karl Anthony Towns, John Wall, Julius Randle, D. Book, DeMarcus Cousins, Tayshaun Prince, Jamal Murray. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And they have some iconic moments in the tournament with A.D. winning a chip. But how do you factor that into one chip in the last 20 years?
Yeah, that almost counts against them in a way. The fact that
you
have an NBA,
so many guys.
You have multiple NBA All-Star teams coming out of Kentucky, and then you look and you go, one chip. I don't know if that's for them or against them.
Yeah, but this is the era of one and done. So, I mean, it's hard to have that kind of success, especially in a tournament format when you don't have the continuity that some of these other programs like UConn and like Villanova have been able to enjoy. Because you're talking about starters being together for multiple years. So I hear you on that. But at the same time, it's like, how can you ignore, when you have those moments and those players that become synonymous with the program, right? Like you talked about Michael Jordan with Carolina, synonymous with the program. Like that matters. Like Jay Will, the success that he had in college basketball, synonymous with Duke basketball. Grant Hill, all of those players. So I'm wondering how much of that matters when we start giving programs blue blood status.
I'll give you an example. I mean, I know they're a blue blood, but yesterday Reese Davis on game day was talking about his top 10 most clutch plays during the tournament. And he had Chris Jenkins, who obviously made the play here a couple of years ago on that trail 3 for Villanova. And we were laughing because it was like literally 4 years before that. People were like, well, Jay Wright has to win one. And all of a sudden, the dude wins back-to-back. And he's in that blue blood conversation for Nova. Like, they're right on the outside looking in my Mount Rushmore. They're like 5. So, and then you're talking about one of the most iconic shots in college basketball history. He's still making money off of it today, guys. And Christian Laettner. I mean, just the catch against Kentucky in the 2008, I'm sorry, forget what year it was, a 92 Elite 8 game, I think it was, because they won it back-to-back. It's one of the most iconic shots that still gets used today in every promotional material around NCAA tournament.
It's funny because when you said Kentucky, I was like, hold on. Let me just look up the name. There's so many.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Oh, that year they won the chip. They had so many players.
You can't hold them all in your head at the same time. It's like, oh my God.
They had MKG on that team.
MKG, Jamal Murray, everyone.
It's crazy.
What's that, Jay?
I'm saying, like, he was the guy that couldn't shoot. Remember, he couldn't shoot the rock?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's right.
D-Book, and you mentioned a lot of Tayshaun Prince back in the day. They had so many guys. I wonder if it counts for or against it. But what you were saying, when you say, like, well, can they ever win it? That's like an NFL quarterback where he's one of the best ever. But even if you're past your prime, or even if it's not your best year, but you win the Super Bowl, now that validates in people's minds everything that came before.
Yeah, like Peyton Manning getting that chip at the end of his career in 2015.
Yes. But he already had one.
Yeah, but multiple. But here's the thing: I'm
thinking of Elway at the end of his career.
Without taking it too far, Max, you got to have multiple chips to be in that special.
Yeah, nowadays you do.
Quarterbacks.
Tom Brady changed the equation. It used to be you just need one. But Elway, I'm thinking of like his whole career. But he never. Then he goes back to back when he's not really Elway anymore. But it kind of validates him. What if Donovan McNabb had gone back to back at the end of his career? He would be thought of like somewhat the way kind of a guy like Elway is thought of. Like, oh my God, look at the numbers and look at all the success in championship games. He got there and then he won 2 Super. Yeah, but he wasn't even that good when he won. That doesn't matter. He won the Super Bowls. It's like winning a national title. No matter what you do in the tournament as a coach or a program, once you win the chip, then you go back and you look at everything the program's done.
So what does that do for Dan Hurley then?
Yeah.
Now that he's at this point, what is it, his 4th year at UConn, Jay? What does this do for him in terms of validating him as one of the better coaches in college basketball?
I mean, I think there's no doubt that he's going to be one of the top. He's a rising star. I mean, he already is a star. I did want to ask you, Chris, because you played at a school that I think is really, I'm not conflicted by it because I still think he's one of the best college coaches in the game. But when you look at the overall body of work, like you start looking at, everything that happened at UVA with them getting bounced early multiple times, but they still won a championship, right? But it's like, how do you look at Tony Bennett overall?
No, I look at Tony Bennett as a coach that's very similar to Dan Hurley in the sense that you're only going to get a certain kind of kid that goes to school there. Just because of the style of play, their pack line defense, it's not going to be an exciting brand of ball. Like Virginia is content playing games in the 40s and 50s. That's not attractive for today's generation of athletes. So I don't necessarily know that they'll be able to have the sustained success, but they'll have moments where you have guys that have been in the program 3 or 4 years. In Kihei Clark's case, 6 years, it seems like. But you'll have times like that when you get those classes that have been together for a long time that can make a deep run into the postseason.
Yeah, it's almost the way, Max, I look at Matt Painter. I mean, they don't have a chip for him to kind of hang his hat on like Tony Bennett does, but you're like, all right, like you guys, Big Ten, I hear you, but it's like multiple early exits, like especially over the last 7 years. Like the recency bias in this stuff is pretty legit.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.